So, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. So what do you want to talk about today?
Well, I want to find out why it is that you people always blaming us for patriarchy.
Well, hello, what does patriarchy mean?
I thought you were going to be more focused on the fact that I said you people.
No, you know what? I am a people and I am part of the you people. That's not the issue.
Yes.
I'm like, what does patriarchy mean? Because you're always saying you people, so I'm assuming you're meaning women.
Well, I don't do it, so I don't know what it means.
You think you don't do it.
Well, tell me how I'm doing.
What is it? First, let me see. What is patriarchy?
It's when everyone thinks that the man must get his way about everything.
Yeah, so loosely, that's basically it. It's about dominance, it's about control, okay?
Right.
It's about dominance and control in a society that is painted along patriarchal lines. So patriarchy means male, from a male perspective,
Okay.
right? But I have to say up front, Zaid, that some of the strongest patriarchs I know are women.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
No, it's true.
Because that brings me to a very important point that I wanted to raise, is that we're always talking so much about patriarchy and how it is that it's the cause of all the problems that we're facing and how society is ruled by men and it's male dominant and everything else. And yes, there's truth in all of that, right? But how often do we stop to think of what the impact of patriarchy is on the human that is expected to fulfill that role as the male dominator of that structure, of that social circle?
So I think there's two things that are really important there with what you said. Is I think men have been disempowered. Now, women, don't shoot me when I say this. Men have been disempowered to behave differently
Yes.
because of the stigma attached. The expectation of if you are a man, you need to behave A, B, C, D, E.
Yes.
Right? The second one, when I said some of the strongest patriarchs or harshest patriarchs I know are women, it's because they have also been socialized into that same system where they have become enablers
Yes.
of patriarchy.
And they don't even realize that they are enabling it, while at the same time, it's quite insane actually if you think about it, right? Because on the one hand, you enable the very system that you claim is oppressing you.
Yes.
On the other hand, because you're oblivious to the fact that you're enabling it, you automatically become a victim of yourself.
So true. So it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
Okay? Because and the thing is, you it's so important when you say that you don't realize that you're doing it. It's because our society has been so well oiled by now, right? That this is the way that you do things, this is the way it's been done, this is the way it's been done for generations, and so it must always be done this way.
Yes.
And it becomes a learned behavior. And you know, from my experience, and I can because I'm a Muslim woman and this is conversations with Muslim women,
Just silence the men, why don't you?
Yes,
We're
no.
not allowed to have a voice in this.
no, you are allowed to have a voice, but you will hear our voice too, because this is
Yeah,
about
I guess it is conversations with Muslim women, isn't
yes,
it?
it's about our experiences.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
I am saying that my experience has been that, you know, everything has been centered around gender. So basically what it's saying, it doesn't matter what kind of human you are. First and foremost, we're going to split you according to whether you're a man or a woman, and then we'll take it from there.
Yes. Absolutely. And that brings me to my favorite topic of all time, which is the use of labels. Right? And patriarchy itself is a label.
Yeah.
So it helps to be able to label things because then everyone has a common kind of point of reference to say, that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't help to then take that label and impose it on someone and say that you are that. Before you disagree with me.
You know I'm gonna.
I know you're gonna. Before you disagree with me, this is the problem with that. The moment you take the label and you apply it to someone and you say you are a chauvinist, you are a misogynist, right? Whether or not they are behaving in a way that is true to that definition It doesn't mean that they are that. It means that how you're experiencing their behavior is that. So if you experience someone as being patriarchal in the way they approach something, 100% justified and understandable that that is your experience of it. It doesn't mean that by intent and design the person is doing that.
Guys, are you ready for the drop the mic moment? Because I'm going to have it now.
You're going to have it?
Yeah.
I thought I just did it.
So basically, that is precisely why conversations with Muslim women exist.
Exactly.
The reason why labels have been used to date is because people are trying to express themselves. Right? But I agree with you in as far as you say you cannot label the person as that. You can say you are demonstrating behaviors that are patriarchal in nature, and it doesn't mean that that person is indeed a patriarchal or a misogynist or whatever kind of person.
Yes.
Right? And this is why this platform is so important, because in the absence of vocabulary and words to express and understand, people are going to continue to label. So if I give you an alternative to say, Zaid, don't label me as a misogynist when I do ABC, but rather say that these behaviors were similar to how a misogynist behaves, or they were misogynistic in nature.
Right.
And I am willing to engage with you on a human level.
Yeah.
To discuss why that is, then I'm sweeping aside the need to label you.
Yes.
I'm letting you know that what you did was not acceptable because it was seen as so, and then we can start engaging and understanding.
I hear you, and I agree to a point. And the point to which I agree is that it's important to set aside the label and to have the maturity to be able to say, this is how I'm experiencing it, and the other person must be able to respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
What's more important, though, is that we need to recognize that there is already a very deeply entrenched stigma associated with these labels.
Yes.
And we need to also recognize that the person who's speaking to the man or the woman, whoever's the enabler in that moment of the harmful behavior, we need to realize that that person still has their own insecurities and vulnerabilities as a human being. So if you're going to use loaded terminology when you're speaking to them, and you trigger a response or a defensiveness from them, you can't entirely blame them for not being reasonable for the rest of the discussion. So more importantly, there's two things that I think comes to mind, right? The one is, when we want to have discussions about patriarchy and misogyny and chauvinism and all of those horrible things, I was going to say amazing things, horrible things.
You were going to be booted out.
Force of habit. When we want to have discussions about those things, we need to recognize that the discussions must be about how we're experiencing a specific behavior in a specific moment.
Yes.
If you're going to wait until it accumulates and you build a case, and then you come and you suddenly slam it all into the other person's face and say, see, this is my evidence that you are being misogynistic, or you're being patriarchal, or you're being condescending, or whatever, it doesn't help.
Yes, and of course it doesn't help, but this has been the narrative all this time, Zaid.
Well, we need to change the narrative.
Yes, so this is what we're trying to do. We're going to give people, inshallah, an outlet to say, process this, but understand that there is years and there's multiple experiences that have been building up for some people, and they need to take it out. So yes, it's going to sound like a pity party, and it's going to sound like moaning, but you know what? You can't tell your story if you can't share your pain. And when you share your pain, you will sound for a while like you're a victim. But that is just so that we can get the outlet, so that the understanding can come.
And you touched on a very important point there, and the reason I smiled halfway through what you were saying there is because I can just already picture the number of people that's going to say, but that's victim blaming. You're now making the victim responsible for how it is that they need to communicate what their pain is and how it is that they must approach resolution of something. And that's absolutely not what we're doing. And also, I want to go as far as saying that it is not the victim's responsibility to be able to deal with this in a more mature way. Right? It is the victim's responsibility to recognize what is the impact on them and why it impacts them the way it does.
Yes.
But what we hope to also achieve through this process, because it's conversations with Muslim women, but it's not exclusively about the woman's experience, because the man is very much an active participant in that experience.
I'm so glad you said that, because I really want to get the point across that this is not an exclusive platform. This is inclusive. So conversations with Muslim women about their experiences may or may not by default include a man. And the mere fact that the experience included a man in some way means that men are included on this platform.
And what I'm hoping that I would be able to contribute to the discussion, inshallah, is that as a man, I want to offer other men the insight and the perspective to gain understanding of how it is that they must hear what is being said, rather than interpret it within the frame of reference that we've always had before.
Yes.
So when a woman communicates a certain way, it must be received as if it is communicated from a woman or from a person that is feeling the impact of that negative behavior, and not need to hear it in a way that will make sense to you as a man, and vice versa.
Absolutely. We need to receive messages exactly as they were delivered and not apply any of our own filters.
Yes.
Because when we start applying our own filters, that's when judgments seep in.
Yes.
Right? So, for example, if you've just been slogging like a workhorse in the sun for 8 hours and you're sweating and you're half dehydrated, and I was standing for 2 hours and my feet are really sore, and I come and I tell you I'm absolutely exhausted, but you turn around and say, well, I was slogging for, you're not hearing me. And don't invalidate the fact that I'm feeling tired.
Yes, and that is at the heart of the difficulty we have with patriarchy, or the patriarchal experience, right?
Yes.
Is that we end up measuring whose oppression and whose suffering is more.
That's it.
And for me, the fascinating thing about this is that the only reason we have any cause to want to compare is because we feel like victims in our own right.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't want to compare my suffering with someone else if I didn't feel like I was being overlooked in my efforts to do what it is that I'm expected to do, or what it is I'm trying to contribute towards my family.
Yes.
So the more we maintain this victim mindset about the fact that we are persecuted, we are trialed, we are tested, we are unappreciated, when we get home and we have a discussion with our partner, or with our family, or with our children, and if they respond in a way that doesn't recognize that struggle of ours, suddenly we feel a need to defend ourselves. And the easiest way to defend yourself, especially if you're a man, is to use your authority and your power.
You touch, I'm getting here. Authority and power as vested by whom?
It's not the authority or power vested by Islam, or by your specific family, or by a specific culture. It is by what you subscribe to as a value system in your family unit that is part of a value system of your community, which is part of a value system of the broader society.
And as a Muslim woman, I am saying that I want to challenge that experience now. I want to change that experience, because power and authority are not gender specific.
Yes.
And I think that is a very important thing. Power and authority are not gender specific. And yet my experience has been that it seems to be something that is reserved, and I'm generalizing, for men.
Absolutely, right? But I think there's a quote that I came across that always fascinates me, because it's such an astute observation. It says that some people assume that they are in a position of authority because of their proximity to power. How does this play out in the patriarchy discussion, or patriarchy, however you want to pronounce that? Is that this is how you inevitably, without being aware of it, become an enabler of the patriarchal structure, by assuming that because you are associated with the authority of the male figure, that your authority then is extracted from that, or is derived from that, and by you acting with that authority because it's derived from that, you become an enabler.
Yes, and far too many times I have seen women become subservient just because of the role that the man has assumed.
Yes.
Based on what you've just said.
And the reason why we assume, and we need to wrap this up around that patriarchy stuff because we can really rabbit hole in so many different directions of this, right?
Yeah.
But the reason why this is so critical when it comes to discussing and understanding patriarchy is that we lose sight of the fact that behind that male dominant figure there is a human being that is lacking in emotional fulfillment, because the moment you put someone on a pedestal, you dehumanize them. The moment you create someone as being larger than life, you automatically strip them of the full spectrum of human experience, right?
And it's so sad because the converse is true.
Yes.
Because the minute that person becomes dehumanized and put on a pedestal, the receiving end is then I've seen women then being forced into a subservient role, being forced and again being dehumanized, because now you will do as I say.
Yes.
You will serve me. This is the way it is, and you have to take a back seat and you have to be quiet.
So maybe a final thoughts from both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And from my side, the one thought that comes to mind right now is that the more inhuman we feel, the more inhumane we behave. So if you want someone to bring out the worst side in them, treat them like less than human. Mm-hmm. And if you think that because of the glory and the accolades and the respect and the stature that is associated with being the head of that family unit is all that a man needs, I can tell you it's not. It's a very lonely place to be. Like they say, it's lonely at the top. Mm-hmm. The more you elevate someone above being human, the more you dehumanize them, and the more likely they are to behave in an insensitive and a lacking compassion way in response to the struggles and the suffering of the people around them.
I think for me, my closing thought is, women, let us tell our stories. You know, if it hurts, it hurts. And if it's a courageous one, it's a courageous one. And they don't always have to be sad and bad stories. Some stories can be celebrated, you know. But my closing thought is, tell the story. In telling the story is where understanding comes.
Yes. And I'm happy you finished off with the word understanding, because we really need to focus on not figuring out who's right and who's wrong in the patriarchal debate. Who's the enabler and who's not the enabler, or who's the supporter and the instigator. That's not going to help us. It's good to raise awareness about how that plays out, but what we want to do is we want to understand why.
Absolutely.
We want to understand why we might enable something that we know is harmful, why we might feel compelled to fill a role that we know is undermining the very objectives of what it is that we're trying to achieve.
For sure. I think definitely, you know, with understanding comes the possibility for change.
Yes, inshallah.
Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.